All right, welcome to the December 8th, 2021 SMI Community Meeting. This is the last call of 2021. I don't know how many meetings you've been having that conversation in, but yes, remind everyone that a couple weeks from now is probably not an ideal time to try to have a meeting. So yeah, other than that, I think we have a few things on the agenda for today. But yeah, winter holiday schedule, we will not have a meeting December 22nd. We will come back January 5th. Let's see, I'm gonna point to Keith and say, hey, Keith, one thing on the agenda is you want us to talk about the transition plan for the move to a new SDK. You wanna give us some updates there?
Yeah, I can, well, kind of, sort of. So this topic, to add some context, because this meeting, the last time we met was a month ago, but this topic came out of some discussions about sunsetting or deprecating the original SMI SDK Go libraries, and we realized that Open Service Mesh has that. Has a hard dependency on those libraries. And so Nick and I are going to give some background on kind of why the SMI controller SDK, the new SDK, is kind of a new solution, kind of what the history. Nick was going to bring talk about a lot of the history behind that, and going to maybe just talk through some of the pitfalls. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like a lot of the key stakeholders here. I think Phil and Daniel were at that meeting, and Nick isn't here, so it's probably best to punt that to our next meeting, just until we can get people here who will benefit the most from that conversation.
Oh yeah, of course. Just want to keep it on the radar, and we'll talk about that more in January then. Awesome. And maybe Nick will be able to make that meeting as well. Of course, we're in the holiday period of people are peeling off at this point, so it's very hard to get consensus on things in December. Especially the day after Kubernetes 1.23 release. It's like everyone is kind of focus everywhere. We did have one other agenda item that you might want to say a few things about, even if we don't have everyone here for the discussion. Do you want to talk a little bit about traffic target and Istio authorization policy?
Sure. Yeah. So this is a bit more of a generic thing. So I'm happy to give to dive into a little bit here, and then I'll talk about some more in January. But I have kind of been pushing the Istio controller SDK, so that Istio to kind of bring Istio into compliance with the SMI spec. And so in the process for doing that, I have been building out support for traffic target under the traffic access group in SMI. The kind of analogous set of specs in Istio is authorization policy to control workload to workload communication. However, there is an inherent incompatibility between the way that traffic target and authorization policy target workloads. So based on the documentation in the SMI spec, traffic target tends to describe a destination as anything with this service account and this namespace. However, authorization policy uses label selectors to identify workloads that are that should be locked down, essentially. And so there's no way in Istio to be able to say, hey, all the things with this service account, when this principal does not this service account, the workload to the service account, then lock that down. So that's not possible. So I think that SMI is a spec. It's a specification that should evolve over time. I'd like to maybe one, and this is probably something we'll need a larger audience for, but one, I'd like to get some understanding over that design choice, and understanding kind of what the thought process has been behind that historically. Two, maybe talk about whether that is a design decision we want to kind of continue with moving forward. There are some concerns I think I have when it comes to multi-cluster in SMI. If you're going to be limiting workload authorization to a service account, even with the multi-cluster service API. Not even thinking too much of implementation. That gets difficult when you've got 2 different clusters. We might have different service accounts and things like that. So that's something we're talking about. Then 3, once all those have been taken care of, I'll maybe propose, help develop, get the stakeholders together, develop a proposal for another alternative identity solution for identifying workloads in SMI. So that's the high level of the problem and kind of the next steps. In my mind, open that up for discussion. If anyone has thoughts.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Keith. And I want to add that when you say like we should evolve the spec, of course, yes, absolutely, we should. And the decision was made. We should never assume the decision was made because it was the right and final decision. I mean, many cases we made the decision that seemed like the best idea at the time. And then when new information comes along, we think, oh, yeah, we should change. So yeah. Yeah, that's basically yes is my answer there.
There's to Bridget's point, like there's an issue related to this set of concerns about the use of, the singular use of service account as like the identifier. And at least there might actually be multiple issues that are opened in this that kind of touch on this. This particular one hits it from the perspective of asking for support, more or less, well, like the specific way of stating it, I think what the ask was like to support OPA and like an integration with OPA. The more generic way of sort of stating it, and I think if memory serves, where the conversation kind of went was like, hey, look, actually, there's a reason why I remember this. This is like the comment that I had made at the time was that, instead of a service account, maybe there's also support for a bearer token or for a SPIFFE identity I do think that I would suggest that I do think that it's reasonable to expect, like as an iteration in this area is done, as we think toward like multi-cluster and the specific consideration around requiring the same exact service account across all clusters is like, yeah, ideally the spec is flexible and wouldn't mandate such a thing. But it wouldn't be embarrassing necessarily to stand behind that, at least initially, and say, hey, look, like we expect you're treating your clusters in a uniform way. And so there's a service account dedicated to the doings of SMI. And so, but to your point, like that's probably the tip of the iceberg in terms of like multiple cluster considerations. And so, I think you'll find that it's easy to garner support around expanding the spec in this regard beyond service account. There's like prior, there's prior secondings of your motion, if you will. And then, yeah, by the way, as I go to stop haranguing you, on your prior topic of the SMI controller SDK, it might be one of those things that we could facilitate just a short recording of an overview that you would give, acknowledging that like people wouldn't be sitting there synchronously, but maybe asynchronously as they're having Christmas cookies or whatever they're eating. They would like for nothing better than to hear an overview that might grease some of the wheels. And if for nothing else, would just make you better at speaking at it if you had to give it twice.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll say that Nick Jackson's got a lot more context than I do, and so I think that's a great idea. I'll DM him offline and kind of pitch that, because I do think that that's something that can be useful. I think he already has a YouTube video where he went through. It's somewhere on the agenda, because I remember him recording something talking about some of the design behind the new controller SDK, as well as some of his some of the reasons for that. I will see if I can't dig that up and post it in the Slack channel, because I know it's here somewhere. I just got to find it.
Yeah, sure. By the way, Jared, I had said I would grab actually, Bridget has, there's only one link that I know of at the moment that sort of explains the controller SDK. And so, yeah, Bridget's got you covered.
All right, thank you.
Um,
Sorry, I have been haven't been able to attend the community meetings much lately, and so I did browse briefly through the notes from the last couple of meetings, which is where I first saw the reference to the new SDK. Just a couple quick questions, sorry, so I catch up and I'll dig into the details, and code and stuff. But is this meant to replace the Go SDK?
Yes, that's the idea.
Okay.
That the Go SDK would eventually be deprecated, and the controller SDK aims to be a one-for-one replacement with along with enhancements to responding to SMI CRDs. So yes.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
I did find that YouTube video and posted it here in the Zoom chat, where Nick kind of goes through at least a little bit of the history. But I'll also reach out to see if we can't get something a bit more maybe narrower in focus.
Jared,
And I added that to the meeting notes as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Jared, additional context there to kind of tie together some of the efforts that you've been involved in. The GitHub action for running SMI conformance is considered for in the SDK. And so Keith, actually maybe a good question to you. What's the status of that aspect of the controller SDK?
Yeah, so the controller SDK doesn't necessarily support SMI conformance. That's the job of the specific service mesh provider implementations. So for instance, kind of shifting context a bit, the Istio controller SDK that I'm working on, I have added that as a GitHub action. It does run against SMI conformance as part of its CI pipeline. There are a few, I'm getting successes that I shouldn't because I've only implemented one of the CRDs. So I've got a note to go back at some point and dig into the conformance tests and figure out why they're passing when they shouldn't. But that is instrumental. And I think Nick has been working on getting the console controller SDK set up with conformance as well. So that at this point, there's at least some kind of reference implementations of how to get that working in GitHub Actions and passing the correct, things to it for the service mesh providers.
Nice. That effort or those false positives, those can be seen in the repo that you're working on. That's within the SMI org.
Yeah. So if you go into the service mesh interface, Istio SMI controller repo, let me see if I can pull up a good example. I had them printing out. There's an issue when I merged to May with it not being able to open things, but I've got I did some weird Kubernetes kubectl logging to get the results here. But if you will dig into this link here, that's an example of a passing one. Everything pass, which it definitely shouldn't, again, since I've only got one CRD implemented. But I went into it and printed all the logs to the console for you there, just so it's visible and obvious what's happening. Because by default, it just kind of says, "Oh, we sent it to the Meshery, to this Meshery token ID, but here the logs are inside the GitHub action." So there you go.
Nice. Yeah, nice. And but to not that I've so looking through this briefly, like it's just to clarify that we're talking about the exact same thing. I think, or my perspective is that the GitHub Actions would ideally perpetually, and actually this is a good, anyway, it would ideally perpetually would exit with success, even if there's 0 tests passing or just partial test pass, because the difference being.
Yeah, I agree. The specifics here, if you dig down to like the last line of the test, it shows that there were no failures, and that's more what I'm referring to. I should have been more specific. So yes, I agree that the GitHub action should always succeed. Well, it depends. That could get weird, but yeah, it's reasonable to expect maybe the GitHub actions to succeed even if the tests fail. But I'm referring to the fact that the actual tests, looking through the tests, are showing as passing for the SMI conformance action. I see 0 failures here. I see, 1 failing test, which is traffic target, but traffic split should succeed, but the other one, I feel like something should fail. I'll need to dig through this again because it's been a while since I've been back around this. If it's only testing traffic access and traffic split, that might be why. And
my interest and digging in is only to prove you right, or like only to and so this is great. Like I'll raise this with some of the folks that have. So by the way, Keith, I'm on of the, like, let's say that this was working perfectly, like, okay, fine, but even then, like it still only has so many tests.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like this access thing that we were talking about before, like, hey, this is Rev 1, so to speak, of the SMI conformance test. So like, bring your thoughts, or bring your, like prepare to provide feedback.
For sure. Yeah. I was able to track down where the tests are defined in the Learn Layer 5 repo under the Layer 5 GitHub organization. I've had, like I said, I had a note to go and make like a GitHub issue or a pull request with more tests for it. The end of the year, like starting around Thanksgiving, is like peak busy time for Shipt, because we're like essentially a retail company. So I've had my hands full with that stuff. But come New Year, I definitely plan to start digging back in more in earnest.
Nice. That's great.
Frankly, I'm surprised to see you on a call, given that, shopping holiday, et cetera, everything exciting for sure.
Yeah, especially when Amazon went down yesterday. That was a fun day.
That was US East 1. Was that the?
Yep. When we are in US East 1 for several of our workloads. We also have stuff in GCP, but we are in AWS East 1 for some core stuff. And so yesterday was a very fun time to practice our failover DR plan.
I think about all of us who have ever worked on anything related to retail have some exciting Black Friday, Cyber Monday stories.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Or slightly around the period, because everyone has like their code freeze, their code thaw, and there's always effects. We've all been there. I want to make sure we hear from Jared, just because, as he was mentioning, he's been able to join this call now, which is great. And Jared, you're with, is that F5? Is that right?
F5 Nginx now.
Yes.
Nginx.
Yeah.
Right.
Wonderful. Yeah. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about like what you're interested in, or what you're looking for specifically from the SMI community. Yeah.
Well, mostly at this point, just trying to keep abreast of what's going on with the community. We have been lagging a bit behind with the API version, so we're wanting to get back on top of that and keep up to date with what's going on as far as the SDK and versions. Been working with Meshry community and trying to get our service mesh integrated with Meshry. And from there, we want to start working with the conformance tests and the performance tests as well. So where we're at the moment.
Do you, at some point, we might have some show and tell. And I think Jared was just saying he has a couple of lacerations that he had on his back that have healed. He had to engage with like F5 legal team in terms of like open source and pull requests and stuff. And so like he survived. I mean, the guy came out the other side. So I think that's impressive.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is not easy. So.
Yeah, always good when you can get that sort of thing working out. All right, well, what other topics do we want to cover today before we say go eat your holiday cookies and whatnot until January 5th?
I don't know if this is the meeting for it. I did post a question in the Slack channel a while back regarding traffic split. Could I get some clarification on that here, or would that be better approached in a GitHub issue or something?
I'm not sure if I can address a specific question other than, yes, there are traffic split definitions in the spec. Keith, is that something you've been looking at more frequently than I have more recently?
I think, Jared, I did see your on November 4th, your question about the A/B testing scenario. I'm not as familiar with traffic split, but it's something I think I could dig into. I think, Jared, if I'm understanding your question correctly, it looks like what you're referencing is a possible contradiction in the spec, or rather a hole in how an implementation might implement the spec. Does that sound right? Like I'm parsing that correctly?
Right. So I wasn't sure how to frame the question because it's a bit nebulous, but essentially we're wondering what is the recommended way to have a traffic split where, say, I have my version 1 and I have a HTTP route group or rule set up to only send traffic to version 2 if X header is passed. And if that header isn't provided, I want to route all traffic to service or to version 1. The way we have it implemented now, the only way to do that is to have a self-referential backend. So your version 1 would be your root.
Yeah.
So that, you know, if the rule isn't matched, it routes back to that. But per the spec, self-referential services is not allowed. So we were wondering how to achieve that, you know.
Yeah, Jared, to recharacterize that is, it's part of the question. Like, hey, is there a default route, or like, is there a way to specify any traffic that doesn't necessarily match an explicit backend or an explicit service? Can you specify? You know, can you identify the default service?
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
And it's more about. I mean, it's easy to do if you're going to send all traffic to another backend, but if you're wanting to split it, say 25/75 between version 1 and version 2 based on that header, then your root service will also have to be a backend, which is where the self-referential comes in. So yeah, that's where we were looking for some guidance there, if there was any.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this would be a great discussion to have in a GitHub issue in the spec. I think that's be a great way to kind of see if anybody else has run into this, how they may have been able to achieve it, or if anybody else shares the same concerns you do.
Oh, I'm on mute. There we go. Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for bringing this forward.
First thing.
Awesome. Thank
And
you.
Merry Christmas.
Yes. And happy, happy, Merry to all. I will see all you fine folks in January, no doubt.
All right. Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Holidays.
Bye.
Yes. See ya.
Bye.